and welcome to episode 6 of the Rookery Archives. My name is Louise, also known as the Nerdy Archer along the internet, and I'm your lovely host. It's our first episode of 2021! We did it, you guys! And after a long, hectic university exam period, I am back here making some new quality content. Have you missed me? Oh god, I've missed doing this so much. And here's a little fun bit. If you missed my announcement during January, then I'm delighted to announce this is also a slightly monumental episode for the channel. It is the first episode of the Rookery's Archives after I was bequeathed the title of Mentor. Yep, that's right. Assassin's Creed UK invited me to join the Mentors Guild, which is kind of a dream come true for me. The Mentors Guild has only been around a couple of years. I think 2017? Maybe 2016, and it's something so big and monumental, and it's such an honour to have been chosen for this, and I still don't entirely believe that it happens some days. I suppose it's a testament to all of you loving this and loving my content, and thank you so much. And a big shout out obviously has to go to Ubisoft and AC UK for, giving me this opportunity. I'm glad you're liking the content. And thank you to everyone's very lovely well wishes and congratulating me into the guild when I announced it on the 22nd of January. I honestly didn't think the post would get that notice, but my notifications skyrocketed, my follower count doubled on Twitter, and it was a hectic 24 hours, and I still don't think I've replied to everyone. So if I haven't replied to your comment, I have seen it. There are just so many. But now the big announcement is out of the way, we should get talking about today's episode. The topic for this episode is the one that I mentioned at the end of episode 5, and I really enjoyed talking about this one. It's about one of the mysteries, or rather a collection of 3, that you can stumble across the map in AC Valhalla, the so-called Daughters of Lerion. A side note, there will be no Assassin's Creed Valhalla spoilers in this episode, just me butchering a couple of pronunciations here and there. I'm recording this literally moments after finishing a lesson on my Italian language course, so this is your warning that some Celtic might sound a bit more Italian than intended. So let's get into it, shall we? In one of the many retellings of the story of Lear, or Lerion, playwright William Shakespeare has this to say: "As flies to wanton boys we are to the gods, they kill us for their sport." And it's safe to say that the tale of Lear and his 3 daughters is not a happy one. Betrayal, revenge, and power all come into play in a sequence of events that not everyone is going to see to the end. Most of the tales about King Lear and his daughters come from the writings of English cleric Geoffrey of Monmouth, who lived from 1095 to 1155, who was a major figure in the early development of British historiography. In approximately 1136, Monmouth wrote the History of the Kings of Britain, detailing the pseudo-historical events of the British Isles over the course of 2,000 years, starting from the Trojans as they founded the kingdoms, and its legendary kings. Monmouth even helped to popularise the stories of King Arthur, and is one of the earliest recorded tales of Lear himself. When we place Geoffrey of Monmouth's writings about Lear in a timeline of this 2,000 years, the writings date the story to around the 8th century BC, or a similar time to the foundation of Rome. Monmouth also identified Lear as the founder of the city which we now know as Leicester in England. For note, the Old Welsh name of Leicester is Caerlear, literally translated to the city of Lear. Reigning for 60 years, Lear was an increasingly foolish king, preferring false praise to genuine sentiment, which, when Lear was to divide his kingdom up between his 3 daughters, Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia, proved to be the seeds of his undoing. They would have to essentially butter up to their father and show how much they loved him. Goneril and Regan did so, but Cordelia, the youngest and most beloved out of the 3, refused to partake. She saw through this facade, and Lear was definitely not amused. He immediately cut Cordelia out of the inheritance, and his eldest 2 daughters would inherit everything upon his death. The 2 daughters which blushes against their father to, let's say, speed up his retirement. As for Cordelia in all of this, while her 2 daughters married nobles, the Dukes of Cornwall and Albany, Lear offered no such match. Perhaps no British lord would marry her without a dowry or the land that her sisters had acquired. The King of France, Aganapus? I'll put the spelling in the description, then sent word to Lear that he would marry her, no strings attached. Even when it clarified that he would get no land or dowry from this, he still wanted to. True love, or perhaps sympathy, either is a viable explanation for why he did so, but eventually they married and Cordelia went to France. What happens next is questioned and changes depending on the tale. In some, Cordelia and her husband rally the French armies to take back Leicester when Goneril, Regan, and their husbands launch their coup against Lear. Once defeated, Lear retakes his throne for another 3 years, and then Cordelia reigns for many, many years after him. But in Shakespeare's retelling, first performed in 1605, Cordelia rallies the French, but the invasion fails, and both she and Lear are sent to be executed. A pardon is granted by a dying illegitimate son of a noble lord, but it's too late to save Cordelia. In Act 5, Lear walks onto stage holding his youngest daughter's corpse and bemoans, "Why should a dog, a horse, a rat have life, and thou no breath at all?" before Lear himself falls dead of grief. Shakespeare's tale ends with all loose ends sorted away. Goneril and Regan are dead. Edmund has died. All evil is defeated, but so are all our heroes, bar one. The wheel has come full circle, and it's rather interesting. Shakespeare's play is perhaps the way most more modern audiences will know of this tale unfolding, with Geoffrey Monmouth the key source for this prior to the 16th century, where it was no longer taken as historical canon. But Shakespeare's ending has not always been as it has now. During the Victorian era, or approximately that time, it was altered so that Cordelia, the sweetest and seen as the quote purest of the 3 daughters, survived the ending, going on to marry the legitimate son Edgar, with the quote unquote villains of the play receiving the justice they deserved. In truth, this altered ending is more similar to Geoffrey Monmouth's original tale. But perhaps you could consider that the ending of the play and its alterations, both to this quote-unquote incorrect version and then back again, could have links in a more meta-standing element with the game's universe. Templar control was high during the period where this quote-unquote edited version of the play was shown to the public. Reginald Birch took control of London for the Templars in the 1730s. Nearly 140 years of Templar control of the British Empire could significantly have an impact on how things are shown to the wider world. But I digress. Going back to the mystery of Lear and his daughters. According to the game's information, Lerion died in 864 AD, while his daughters took up arms in fleeing into the wilds of East Anglia. In this iteration of the tale by Ubisoft, Lerion was one of the Order of the Ancients, aka the precursor to the Templar, a somewhat far cry from the more benevolent interpretations we see from Shakespeare and Geoffrey. As with his daughters, while Goneril and Regan both held elements of resentment, albeit here not against their father, Cordelia has seriously taken a turn down the path to villainy here. With all 3 of their fights relying on trickery, gusto, and a heck of a lot of arrows in order to succeed, the aesthetics of each suggest an unknown factor, which is significantly less human-friendly than we might think. And to quote their database entry in Valhalla, when they reappeared some years later, well, they were miffed. Edmund, who I mentioned before, who executed their father Lear in this version of the tale, was succeeded by a familiar name, Oswald of East Anglia. The client king, we and Eivor follow through the main story arc for East Anglia during the events of Valhalla, which brings us to the questions that follow. Which side of the story is true? Does Shakespeare's interpretation hold weight and truth, or are the changes purely for artistic license? As Lerion was of the Order, did he find something from those who came before, which helped the daughters undergo their roaring rampage of revenge? What happened to the rest of the lords and nobles who plotted against Lear? Were they aligned with the Hidden Ones, or instead opportunistic members of Lear's own order out to take his spot on the throne and notoriety? And more importantly, what do we make of these different retellings of the same story? On Shakespeare's side, we don't actually know that much about his involvement with the Assassin Templar War, if he had any involvement in the first place. Considering that his plays made reference to enemies of Elizabeth I being the inspiration for less scrupulous characters, and the Queen confirmed by database entries in prior games as having an assassin affiliation, well, you can draw the conclusions from that. Bill may have had a second or third degree handling of the area, influenced by ideas and pieces of Eden that he didn't know the truth about. And Geoffrey Monmouth? Like Shakespeare after him, he wrote with an intent, likely influenced by the regnal families in power, an attempt to show why England and extension Wales is strong and with a strong lineage. There's 1,001 different possible explanations for this, and I don't know Jeffrey well enough to explain them all. There are thousands of studies out there, and I suggest you go and look for yourselves if you want to know more about Jeffrey of Monmouth. And then we come to the game's iteration. In contrast to the other two depictions, it shows that all three of the daughters really did care about Lear. And the betrayal sent even the youngest and sweetest into a blinding desire for this revenge. Lear is betrayed by some of his lords in every iteration. Though as a member of the Order of Ancients, his gaming counterpart is far less sympathetic than literary or theatrical. Around the battlefields for each of the three daughters, there are no notes, no indications for how this came to be. Just like the corrupted symbols across each map, they simply just are. If you're unfortunate enough to not pay attention to the map of England while exploring the woodlands, and all of a sudden there's a spooky looking altar and smoke, and you can hear a grating, vengeful voice coming from behind you, then prepare to have Abel fight for their life. Perhaps we might learn a bit more about how this all came to be in the Wrath of the Druids DLC coming out later this year. Maybe we will never know. Nothing makes fighting the daughters scarier than not knowing anything. What do you think? Is it trickery? Something related to a piece of Eden or a corrupted symbol? Is it Abel's imagination? Did the quote I mentioned from Shakespeare at the beginning of this episode hide any hints towards what we might face in the Wrath of the Druids, or any further contact with the Isu? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment down below what you think. I love it when the lore and the games give us open questions like this. It gives so much room to interpretation and theory making, and oh god, as much as I love to know, I love to try and theorize. It's beautiful. And speaking of theories, now that many places such as the ones who came before Community are lowering their spoiler warnings for Valhalla, you can be sure that I have some of my own from the games and from the wider universe of the information that we learned from this game, heading your way soon. I'm finger gunning, but you can't actually see. On top of this, I also have a few episode ideas beyond these theories already in contention for next week. But if you have an idea of something you would like me to cover, comment down below or message me on Twitter. I'd also really, really like it if there were some more guests on this podcast. So if you want to join in, regardless of how much you know about the lore or how many games you've played, or you have a suggestion of someone who might be interested, comment down below or get in touch any way you can. My Twitter and my Instagram are linked in the description. And in case you missed it, I was invited back onto Let's Talk AC to sit down with Declan and discuss the historical accuracy of the games. You can also find that down below, as well as any references to this episode's script and any other articles I found interesting or relevant to the topic. But we have come to the end of another episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening and showing your support any way you can. You can find the playlist for all previous episodes on screen. Don't forget to subscribe if you like my content. My name is Louise, also known as The Nerdy Archer. This has been the Rookery's Archives episode 6, and I hope to see you flying back to the Rookery soon.